There we go.
All right, 3, 2, is it? All right, we are live.
Indeed, we
Welcome.
are. There's a
Yes,
little button in that upper left corner says live.
live. It said so. If I can't press that little button, I don't know what else I can trust.
Right. Exactly.
Hi, I'm Blaine Bartlett,
I'm Dolan White.
and you are joining us for what we're calling the Soul of Business Experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
That's
and
our conversation today.
yeah, and when we're talking about the Soul of Business Experience, I mean, you actually came up with something that I really resonated with, and just kind of a tagline for it.
Yeah. As I thought about it, it really is. I think we are at a point in time where there has to be a shift. And so what really resonated with me is the next evolution in leadership.
Yep.
Because leadership, we know, it's proven in the past, things that don't evolve pass. I don't mean that I don't mean like get left behind. I mean like they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I think leadership is one of those. We are in that space and in time where leadership has to evolve. And as a couple of old white-haired dudes, there's a lot that we've done in our career that bring in that context, bring in that experience, bring the knowledge around what that evolution looks like. And
that's where this soul of business actually begins to resonate.
right.
The kind of leadership that we're looking at, the kind of leader that we're articulating, and you're going to be hearing us talk about today, has to do with how do we tap into that enlivening force, if you will, that gave your business breath to begin with.
Yeah.
The idea that businesses grow and they expand and they evolve is all well understood. But in that evolutionary growth process, oftentimes what happens is a disconnection from the for the sake of what that makes the
Yes.
business unique, that allows for people to go, I want to be a part of that. And
Yeah.
the idea of emotional engagement as opposed to compliant participation comes into play very strongly.
Yeah,
So
it does.
this is the nature of the kind of leadership that we're looking at producing.
Yeah, it's interesting, Blaine, that as you're talking about this. So I've had many, many conversations recently around where we are from a generative place in business today with AI and the impacts on business from an AI perspective. And I think leaders, as you listen to this today, we're really leaning in on one of the risks at where we are sits kind of on this technological precipice as we're in there is the loss of some of the things that we talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is the loss of the soul. So today we're going to really kind of lean in on that. And if you listen to it kind of through that context, and also listen to it from where you are as a leader currently in your stance, I think you'll find some interesting ideas as we present some of these concepts to you from an evolutionary standpoint. So
So what this isn't is a training program. What this isn't
no,
is a sales pitch. What this isn't is none of the above. What we want to do here is plant a couple of seeds that will begin your questioning, hopefully, about how you're approaching your job, quote unquote job, your role as a leader in your organization, as a leader in your life.
right.
Um, you know, for both Dolan and myself, the purpose of business, you need to make money, obviously. You need to have a profitable business if you're going to be around.
Right.
But that's not the for the sake of what that you exist. The purpose of business is to create the experience. And this is very utopiistic, I admit that, but this is the evolutionary move. The purpose of business is to create the possibility of thriving for the people that consume your product or service. If people feel that they have an opportunity to thrive, that their life is better because they came into contact with your product, with your service, they're going to continue coming back to be in
Yeah.
contact with your product or service. That's a for the sake of what question, for the sake of what do we do what we do through the use of our product, through the use of our services, and how do we lead people in the process of connecting to that. That's what we're looking at here. And that's where the soul of the business comes into play. That's where aliveness actually is generated.
Yeah.
So,
Well said.
and we're talking about evolution. Yeah. If you try to hold on to what, I mean, interestingly, I was interviewed today uh, by a fellow that flew over from Vietnam to sit down and talk with me about the idea of newness. And yeah, quite frankly, there's nothing new under the sun. But the idea of newness comes into play here. And this is where evolutionary questions start to actually carry some relevance.
Yeah.
Why leadership feels heavier than it should is because we're holding on to archaic models about what leadership is supposed to do and what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And as long as we're holding on to those models, those old ways of thinking, those old ways of actually engaging and behaving, those old ways of moving the needle, it's going to feel like you got a lot of weight on your shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And I think what happens is from a leadership perspective, there is that propensity, I think, sometimes blame for the I got this
Mhm.
kind of a thinking. I got this. I've reached this is where I'm at, and this is how I'm going to lead. And as everything around you continues to evolve, that burden of I got this becomes heavier, heavier, and heavier and heavier. And you start to lose focus. You don't know why. I just feel it's heavier. This is harder.
Yeah. I thought I was doing it right.
Yeah.
And you probably were doing it right. But the question here has less
Yeah,
to
well
do
said.
with it really isn't. This is an evolutionary question. Yeah. And the question is not, are you doing it right or wrong?
Mhm.
The question is what you're doing working for what's now required? And that is a very different question because
Yes.
for most of us, and this is why leadership feels heavier, what we're doing isn't working.
Right.
Yeah. Either subjectively or objectively. And the subjective will kick in first. It just will feel off.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Yeah.
sure why it feels off. I
It's a
thought I was checking all the boxes.
right. It's a quiet, subtle thing. Yeah. And it's funny because I like the comment in this slide, there's leadership. Again, it's one of the folks that we get to speak with when clients and interviews and things that we do, both to and from interviews. But I love this statement: most leadership pain doesn't feel like failure.
Yeah.
And it is leadership. Leadership can be a lonely sport. There is that feeling like I am, something is not right. I know I'm doing what I'm doing, but but I am not comfortable.
Yeah.
Pain is a moment of discomfort.
Discomfort, dis-ease. Yeah, it's
Yes.
it's when the system is out of alignment. And well, again, I kind of go back to the whole notion of an evolutionary move. Dis-ease, you just think of your body as it grows,
Yeah,
growing pains. I mean, I remember my grandmother talking about growing pains,
that's right.
and they were real. They were real. My bones would creak, my knees would hurt, my fingers
Sure.
would hurt. Growing pains. Most leadership pain doesn't feel like failure, but if we're not paying attention to it, we begin to become inured to it. And it's going, well, this is just the way it is. This is the way it's supposed to be. And no, it's
Yeah.
not. No, it's not. When the system is in equilibrium, when the system is actually holistically generating a new way of being, doing, and having, it does not feel painful. This is where,
Right.
we start looking at the nature of flow states. Yeah, how do we move ourselves and our organization into flow more elegantly than what we have typically found ways to do?
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of stuff in that sentence. Yeah. How do you move elegantly into flow?
Yeah.
A lot of leadership activity results in people having to go back and clean up after themselves after they've done whatever it was that they were doing. I'm the boss, go forth and conquer. Oh my God, then you broke it. Well, okay, let me go clean that up.
Yeah.
We want to find ways to do it far more elegantly. And that's
Yeah.
what we're looking at here from this emergence perspective.
Yeah. And I like this. Your leadership pain, things that it feels like it's well, I'm still performing.
Mhm.
It's performative leadership. So I'm still performing. Things
Yeah.
are still performing. We're still going. We're still kind of growing.
Yeah, we're hitting our numbers.
Yeah, to miss that word kinda, but we're still
Kinda.
growing, right? Kinda. But yet even through all of that, it's still heavier.
Yeah. And here's the real interesting paradox on that. Even though we are performing, and the metrics would say that we are, even though we're still growing, into what? Yeah, is it an iteration of what was before, or is it actually a kind of growth that is transforming who we are as an organization, who we are as an individual? If we're
Yeah.
not transforming ourselves, our businesses into something other than what it was 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 years ago, we are not leading effectively. And that's why it begins to feel heavier. It's
Mhm.
because the soul does not have room to breathe. Yeah, we keep
Well
putting
said.
layers on it. It's going, well, this is the way we've always done it. We've always done it this way. Let's just keep doing it. It's working. And I use the word working here very advisedly. It's working in the sense that, we're hitting our numbers. But yeah, it's just an incremental bump. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's map out best practices. Well, best practices, no people know how to do that. Let's do something nobody's ever done before. That will call into question a creative response. And that can be really exciting, but it's also immensely frightening for leaders.
Oh, yeah, quite so. I love that phrase, your best practices and SOPs, and let's write a new practices document.
Yeah. A,
Let's let's innovate.
a
Let's
document based on what if.
right, exactly. Moving possibility to reality.
Yeah.
Let's focus there. But it's interesting, with your comment, because I think one of the things that comes out of this from performing and we're still growing, and you and I talk about this frequently with our clients, which is a leaders, which is a tried and true statement. What got us here won't get us there. But it is that assumption that, well, if it was working last year, let's keep doing that same very thing with everything around you has evolved. Everything around you has changed based on that assumption that growing is, I'm going to do what I used to do, and we should be able to continue that same path.
Yeah. Yeah, the model that most leaders have in their mind is kind of and you'll see this in cartoon representations where the graph kind of
Yes.
goes up. It's just this straight line. Are we successful? Well, let's just look at the graph. Well, yeah, we're successful. All you are is a stronger iteration of what you were before.
Mhm.
Okay. Nothing fundamental has probably changed. Yeah, the people haven't necessarily grown. The business, even though the revenue base may have grown, you aren't innovatively different than what you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's problematic. Leadership is about, and Dolan, you mentioned this. Leadership is about it really is the art of articulating possibilities so
Mhm.
that people go, ooh, they get lit up. Possibilities. Then it's a challenge of moving that possibility into the framing of probability so that you can produce a reality out of it. But
Yeah.
it's the possibility where the soul actually kicks into gear.
Yeah.
That's the for the sake of what that matters. Why does this matter? That's what we want to be able to tap into as leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite topics. This happens all of the time, right? We assume the problem is effort, skill, discipline, motivation. This could be a very lengthy slide. We assume that the problem is, and inevitably what the problem is not what you assume it is.
Guaranteed.
It will
The
be
problem
different.
is in the thinking that makes it a problem. The problem
Yeah,
is in the thinking that makes it a problem. If you don't change your way of thinking, which, yeah, how I describe something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about it generates behavior. I want to change my thinking, trying to get people to behave differently, which is what leaders try to do. Let's get them to do it different so we can get different results. You're dead in the water if that's your model. I have to
yeah,
be able to affect the thinking, how people describe to themselves what's going on, because that
yeah,
generates the experience that they have about, am I in, am I out? Yeah. Do I engage? Do I disengage? Yeah, all of that stuff comes from thinking. Shift thinking, I shift the internal experience. I shift the internal experience. People begin to behave in different ways
yeah,
that are consistent, ways that are consistent with that description process.
yeah. I love
Behavior is always an indication of people's thinking.
Yeah, I love that statement because as people behave, so leaders, we have a tendency to think of the do. When you read this slide, effort is a do, skill is a do, discipline is a do. Do doesn't happen until behavior.
Spot on.
Just doesn't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. Our old friend, bless his soul, had a program that he called Thinking into Results.
Yes.
Yeah, Bob Proctor. Dolan and I have known Bob for years and did
Yeah.
work with him. He did work with us. And he was adamant about this. You think yourself into results. Whatever results you have in front of you right now is a consequence of the current thinking that you're engaged in.
Hmm.
The problem isn't effort. The problem isn't skill or discipline. The problem is the way we think about it.
No, it is
We
a
want to be
law.
able to change that. That's the law.
It is a law. Say that with all the gravity. So
Yeah.
and it just for the sake of expediency, but leadership hasn't failed. When we think about leadership, and that's an important opening preamble. Leadership hasn't failed.
Yeah.
The operating model that you're living with, the operating model that you're moving forward, that you're moving you first and your organization and your team second, has expired. It's kind of like milk in the fridge this morning. Like I'm not going to drink this. Your operating model has expired
Yeah.
because things around you now have changed. So leadership hasn't failed, but the manner in which you operate is no longer in existence.
And how that gets demonstrated, I mean, and it has to do with the nature of change. I mean, when we look at, the need
Yeah.
for an evolutionary shift in leadership, it's a consequence of the rapid rate of change that we find ourselves involved with today. Change is an accelerant that is not being limited. I mean, it's a runaway locomotive in one sense here, particularly when you start looking at AI. The
Oh no.
implications for that. Um, the problem with change is almost never the change. It's how people think about it. The problem with change is the disruption to existing relationships that change causes. And that's what we're talking about around operating models. All any organization is a collection of people that are in relationship. And the most obvious part of that is the interpersonal relationships. But when we look at it as an operating model, people have relationship with work process. They have relationship with tools. They have relationship with the abstract things such as values, vision. Those are all areas of an organization that have a relational dynamic associated with it. And if that operating model does not account for, if your operating model does not account for shifts in those relationships, this is when we go back to the question of elegance. Elegance basically is a system that is operating with minimal to no adverse effects.
Right.
It's, if you think about it as a software code, it's bug free. That's an operating system that is elegant. Most organizations today, as a function of the leadership activities that are in place, are anything but bug free. There
Right.
are all kinds of unintended consequences because the operating model has expired and people don't know how to pay attention to what is actually expired here. It's a relational piece. Relationships have expiry dates. They need to be renewed. And if you don't know what or how, all bets are off.
Yeah. So true. Well said.
Hey, what can I say? I just said it.
And this is a quick segue slide, which is exactly what we've been talking about. Every level of scale. And by the way, scale, we to your point, we see that J curve picture, right? There's micro levels inside of that J curve that
Yep.
occurs if you take it apart piece by piece. But every level of scale requires a different way of leading. Leading must evolve to the season that you are living in, which is yet another conversation.
Oh, we got a whole yeah, wrap on that one. But I mean, when you think about it, your
Yeah.
business, when you think about organizations, they are living systems. And
Yeah.
when you think about, I mean, nature for me has been probably the greatest teacher I've ever had, just in terms about how life actually is assembled, if you will. And I live up in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, and we definitely have seasons here: fall, winter, spring, summer. And each one of these seasons is different, but they're all absolutely crucial to the health of the ecosystem. Now, you take that metaphorically, every organization has a seasonality to it. And if you're trying to keep it in summer because you happen to like, the taste of summer, you force something that is not natural. There is an unfolding that needs to occur where fall begins to come into play here. And I mean, but how do you lead that shift? How do you lead into it and how do you lead out of it? One size does not fit all. Yeah, when things are cooking with gas, when it's in summertime, as an example here, there's not a whole lot you need to do as a leader except kind of keep everybody's focus on the ball. I mean, here's where we're heading. You get into wintertime and it's kind of like, what the hell are we doing? And the wheels have come off.
Right.
It's a different leadership conversations required. And if you as a leader do not know the distinction between summer and winter, you got a problem.
Yep.
Guaranteed.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
will, it's a matter of death and taxes at that point.
Yes. Every level of scale requires different ways of leading.
Yeah.
So, just taking that, seasonality model, when you try to, and this is for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, as you try to scale your organization, which you're going to want to do, you want to scale it.
Sure.
Every bump requires a different move. Every bump requires a different way of thinking, which generates a different way of doing. Okay. So you begin to be yourself into a different reality.
Very true. This is I love that when we talk about symptoms frequently when we're evaluating the current stance. But what happens is when that model doesn't fit, and leaders, as you see this, right, friction increases. By the way, and we want to, just for the sake of expediency today, the friction increases, but you want friction, kinds of friction, but friction increases. When that occurs, trust erodes. That commitment that we make to and with each other begins to erode. And when that out of that erosion, decisions come to a stop. They slow way down. And it's not because people don't know how to make a decision, but because they feel untrusted to make a decision. And so they won't step through the gate because there's a fear barrier, there's a terror barrier there. And then effort rises. Then as the leader, you'll notice it's one of the early symptoms at that point as a leader is take a look at your calendar.
Mm.
And your calendar fills up with checkpoint meetings and KPI meetings and decision meetings. And so effort rises, and that rises unilaterally across the body of your organization. Because as that effort rises on your side as the leader, the gravity pulls everybody else into the same thing. And you end up with that. That probably never has happened in any of the leaders, any of your experiences where you end a day and say, well, I had 8 meetings and nothing got done. And so leverage failed.
Yeah. Yeah. And leverage is, I mean, when we're looking at flow states, when you're in a flow state, leverage is actually in place here because it doesn't take much to
Has to be.
move the needle when everything is actually aligned and is actually working well. You can just let you think of a trim tab, sort of a thing. You don't have to move the entire control surface to get a shift. When things are lined up, just a little tweak on that trim tab can actually bring it back to center. That's what
Yeah.
we're looking at here. So this is, an operational question for you as a leader. Where is the pinch point right now? Where's the pinch point? When the model doesn't fit, you're going to begin to see something appear in one or all of these 5 different silos.
Yes.
And
Yeah, that's an important point, not to interrupt you.
no,
With
please
leaders,
do.
not to harken back to what Blaine, but I will anyway. But that's a really important part. One thing that happens there, Blaine, is you will see these in different steps in different places in your organization.
Yep.
So you will experience all of these things in different areas, but they all lead to the same symptom. Your model has expired.
Your model is expired. And again, we're looking here at the soul of business experience. When you, as a leader, can find ways to tap into that creative source, you begin to mitigate the consequence of some of this stuff. You begin to neutralize the impact of some of the operational dysfunction, in the model.
Yep.
So, speaking of that, 3 ways that leaders, if we're looking about this as an evolutionary move, 3 ways that you can begin to shift how you're doing what you're doing. And again, this has to do with thinking more than actual doing, because the doing will come out of the thinking.
Yeah, very
Excellence,
much.
genius, and soul. And we're going to touch on all 3 of these here very briefly.
Let's go explore those.
Tally ho.
I love this. Excellence is the foundation that makes growth, trust, and scale possible. And there are a lot of praise, I think, Blaine, for excellence. Tony Robbins talks about complexity is the enemy of execution. You've talked about ease and elegance. There's a lot of ways to paraphrase that word excellence, but excellence without that foundation, growth and trust, those two are not, it's not interchangeable things. Growth and trust are very dynamically different, and very closely wed. Not that, they could be cousins, but that's a whole different thing. Growth, trust, and scale. Without that, without the excellence, you can't get to that side. You can't get to growth. You can't get to trust, and you can't get to scale.
Yeah. And this whole notion of excellence has to do with standard setting.
Yep.
Yeah, in large part, not exclusively, but there are standards in place here. Good enough is not what we're looking at here.
No.
We did just enough to get by. That's not gonna fly. People want the experience of excelling. I want to feel as if I hit a home run, or at least I had the opportunity at bat to hit a home run. Whether I whiffed or not is not the point. The outcome isn't necessarily the metric. Was I in a position to tap into everything that I could bring to the table, and I brought it to the table?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're looking. That's actually what excellence is about. Tapping into that repository of creativity, that repository of innovation that allows me to feel more alive. I'm expressing myself more fully. And as a consequence, we express ourselves more. This is the differentiator in business. If you can tap into this, you end up differentiating yourself from your competition in ways that they can't touch, because it's unique to who you are as an organization.
Yeah.
Your DNA is in that.
Yeah, I love that statement because there is a, and so leaders, as you listen to this, excellence, and that's why here are three things, and there's more, but the three things we're talking about today, excellence has to be a focus. Most leaders, because of from the structure of leadership of the legacy leader, that's why this is an evolutionary approach to leadership. Most leaders, excellence occurs at the end.
Right.
If I do these things, an outcome of doing these things is excellence.
You need to bake it in on the front end.
Excellence is one, if not the starting place.
Which will lead us into genius. Yeah. How do you set it up on the front end? Well, everything in life works in patterns. I mean, that's you got when I mentioned earlier that all an organization is a collection of people that are in relationship. Another way of describing relationships is patterned ways of interacting. That's what that's what a relational dynamic is. It's a patterned way of interacting. And most of the patterns that are in place are not functionally effective any longer. They worked back then. This is where
Right.
the evolutionary question starts to come into play here. What new patterns do we need to begin to create? The way you create something new is to interrupt existing patterns so that something new becomes possible. If you try to interject something into a system where the patterns are running on a full tilt boogie, it's going, the system is going to kick whatever it is that you try to introduce out on its ass. I mean, it's just not going to work. You've
Yes.
got to interrupt the pattern first. And what kind of patterns are we talking about? Thinking patterns, ways of understanding what's in front of me. Genius is the ability to see patterns and then, as a consequence, make fewer and better decisions. It allows you to create leverage because things now become far clearer. And as a result of that, you have far less effort involved in making it happen. That's the beauty of genius in this context.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important. So leaders, as we think about that from your perspective in the body of your organization, it is that and one of leaning in on that rather than effort part. And we'll harken back to a few slides. Usually when the model is busted, we pour on more effort. I know I'll work harder. I'll ask my team to work overtime. I will, and there's a do involved on the other side of that. But I love that comment, Blaine, around genius is the ability to see the patterns, to understand it, and to create clarity. Without clarity, we'll make up our own story.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And Dolan and I, a lot of the work all of our work is informed by something that we call the for the sake of what.
Yes.
And the for the sake of what is a great clarifier. One of the things that I've experienced, and I know that Dolan has experienced this as well, in the combined almost 100 years that we've got in teaching leadership and working with leadership.
Sad but true.
Sad but true. One of the things that is very obvious to me anyway is that most people are not aware of what's in play. And what I mean by that is, unless that for the sake of what has been presenced, people will make up their own story about what's important. For the sake of what is a contextual frame that gives meaning to the content in the organization. Without context, content becomes meaningless. And every organization has got content, work processes, things that we do, visions, values, all this stuff is content. And if you don't have a clarified frame, a contextual understanding of what we're up to for the sake of what, people will take the content and they'll run to the woodshed. They'll do all kinds of stuff with it because they're going to make up something that makes sense to them. And it is likely not going to give you what it is that you want. This is where the existing operating model is oftentimes broken because context is not in place, a unifying context that is compelling, that is attractive, that invites people to emotionally engage. For the sake of what? Why is this important to you? What does it make possible for you? What do you get to have, do, or be if we're successful in pulling this off? That's a personal question that if you can get people to answer that in real time, now you've got a basis here from an operational perspective to really pull together.
Yeah. Very true. So true.
And that's where this comes into play here. When you ask that question for the sake of what does it make possible? All of a sudden, the soul lights up. You'll see a spark in people's eyes. Oh, I get to do that. Ooh, that's a possibility. I haven't thought that I could get that here. Soul is leading from alignment where purpose, values, and action are coherent. And by coherence, we're talking about resonance. There's a vibrational, and I don't want to get woo-woo here, but
Right.
woo I will go. There's a vibrational fit here. Everything vibrates. Everything has a frequency associated
Yeah.
with it. And when you can lock into that frequency where people all of a sudden go, ooh, they sit up. Now you've got the possibility of an aligned effort moving from someplace towards someplace with minimal effort, minimal unintended consequences. And it's easy, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and it's creative. And you find yourself doing things in an innovative way that nobody else is doing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that statement. Well, there's two things that come out of that in recent conversation. One of the components we were talking about was soul has weight. Soul is not a thing that has no weight and just kind of exists, kind of a puff of smoke or whatever you want to call it. Soul has weight. And I love your comment, Lane, because one of the things that alignment is vibration. It is a vibration. It is that without, again, I'll go woo-woo. Alignment is vibration. And when you are alignment, it is a dissonance in the vibration. We think of that when we hear, as an example, being a musician, when I hear people singing harmony and there's a note is off, you can hear the dissonance. It's the same thing as that faculty that we have of the feeling of the dissonance. Soul is leading from alignment, not dissonance, where purpose, values, and actions are coherent. You are in the flow.
Yep. And just a capstone on this. Energy will follow attention. It never follows intention. And a lot of leaders will lead with intention as the driving force, forgetting that the subjective attention dynamic is in play all the time. Squirrel. And all of a sudden, people's attention gets drawn someplace other than where you want it to be.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that is a sapping of energy. Energy is not now available to produce what it is that you want to produce. So when we're looking at coherence, that dissonance is a distractor. Dissonance is an attention grabber.
Mm-hmm.
And if you aren't paying attention to the dissonance, the presence of, and the causation, and what caused it, this is where patterns come in. What caused that? That seems to be the same dissonance that keeps showing up. And it shows up in people going, and I love this example. We've got a new objective, a new thing that we're going in this direction. This is a big deal. Is everybody committed? Yeah, I'm committed. How are we going to do it? The first thing out of people's mouths are, how are we going to do it? As soon as you hear how, just know they are not in alignment. They have not locked into the frequency.
Right.
Because if they were locked into the frequency, the how would be irrelevant. They just know what's going to happen, and they're willing to just jump and go and figure it out.
Yes.
Question how will stop everything. This is an operating system consequence, and a legacy system will default to how.
Yeah. I love that. Love that, because the hows automatically leads to but. But there's a t-shirt in there somewhere. Go to www.Lane's T-shirts and we'll get you one. But there is a t-shirt in there. And so leaders, as we're just to kind of capstone these three things, these are three things from an evolutionary, and there's more, but today, for the sake of expediency, we can only talk about three: with excellence and
Genius, genius,
genius
and
and soul.
soul.
And all of these are tight. What you've heard us say they're tightly interwoven. And the evolutionary component, it puts these at the front,
Yep.
not at the back.
Not at the back. Yeah.
And there's more. But if you think about what we've been talking about, we'll get into a little bit more here. But as we think about that, from the placement, the thinking behind it, what is genius? The recognition of patterns. What is soul? Soul is leading from alignment and coherence. When you begin to think about those and apply them to your organization, you as the leader shift, not only in your leadership stance, but you're able to sustain yourself as that leader through the seasonality, through the changes in scale, through that moment, so that you are not living in an expired model in that moment, which in turn will cause your business and your team, will disrupt the success of your business and disrupt your team's performance. There it is.
Complexity has outpaced control. The legacy, and I mean legacy, leadership model is command and control. Yeah, I am the leader. I've got to be in control. I'm the leader. I've got to give direction. I'm the leader. Yeah, here's the resources that you have. Let's go forth and conquer. That sort of a thing. The more complex the system is, the less it can actually afford to have a single nexus of control. There's now this gets kind of deep in the woods around systems dynamics, but in any complex system, the element in the system that has the most choices available to it will be the dominant element in the system. It's called the law of requisite variety. You
Right.
don't need to remember that. The law of requisite variety basically says the more choices we have available to us, the more dominant we will be in a complex system, because we can respond quicker, faster, more creatively. So part of the challenge for leadership, and this is what we're talking about leadership innovation, one size won't fit all. How do you begin to learn to be more choiceful? Coin a word here.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Choiceful. How do you learn that? Part of it has to do with vulnerability. Being willing to just say, I don't know right now. Okay, which for a lot of leaders is incredibly frightening. It's kind of like, what do you mean you don't know? We pay you the big bucks to know. And
Yep.
Yeah, that won't work. Complexity has outpaced control. So part of the new leadership model, quote unquote new, the leadership model that's emerging, has less to do with a titular leader, running everything, and more about a collaborative process where you invite, and this is how, we end up, Dolan and I end up defining leadership. It's the process of influencing others in order to co-create coordinated movement in pursuit of a worthy ideal.
Mm-hmm.
4 components to this: influencing, your state of being. How are you showing up? Before you ever open your mouth, what are you doing? What have you set in motion? Co-creating. How do you get people to come with you? There's an invitational process that is involved there. It's not directive, it's an invitation. Co-creating coordinated movement. We talked about friction. You're going to step on each other's toes as you start moving into unknown territory, guaranteed. How do you coordinate in that sort of an environment so that it's not personal? You actually begin to learn from each other. This is where diversity actually makes a big difference. And then, for the sake of what? In pursuit of a worthy ideal. What's important? A 10% increase in revenue is not a worthy ideal, guaranteed. No. That is not going to get the juice flowing.
No.
That's not what we're after here. An emergent leadership begins to create an emerging organization that is going to be fundamentally different in 3 years, 2 years than it is today. That's what we're after. And you can't get there by trying to control the system.
No, not in any way, shape, or form.
So If you're not controlling, what are you doing?
Yeah. You're introducing, you move structures. You introduce structures, which means you do new things. Introduction means it's new. Introduce structures that keep trust, clarity, and growth. Alignment replaces force. Trust replaces control, and coherence. These are the things we've talked about. Excellence, genius,
And soul.
coherence.
Coherence.
All of these, they begin and they add pillars into your organization that gives you and into your life as a leader and your family. They give you the ability then to introduce these structures so that you can build upon, and not only have that, but a lot of leaders talk about, well, we have trust. We got clarity. We got growth, but in accountability, but generally there's dissonance. They are not aligned. And so what this does is it gives you the ability to move those structures into a place of alignment in your organization. And then occurs ease and elegance, velocity, sustainability, the ability to weather change. We talked about AI briefly at the beginning of this.
Mhm.
And when you're in the position of new emerging, and AI won't be the end of it all. There is
No.
more.
It's just the tip of the iceberg.
This is
Yeah.
just the start. Yeah.
Yeah, and the net of this particular slide actually speaks to, from a leadership perspective, what you end up becoming as a designer. How are you designing your organization
Well said. Yeah.
for the future? Because
Right.
most of us have inherited a design model for an organization that is hierarchical in nature. Think of the typical organization chart. Yeah, it's a triangle for a reason. It's stable. Stability can be your worst enemy in this particular sense. Management will look for stability and predictability. Leadership causes chaos and unpredictability.
Right.
There's two dynamics in play here.
Need them both.
And you need them both, but you can't default to one and embrace it. Most people that call themselves leaders are actually managers in disguise. They want complete predictability and stability. In
Right.
today's world, that's not, that's the booby prize. That's the booby prize.
Yes. And that's a bird, by the way.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, exactly. It's a booby, purple-footed booty, purple-footed booby.
There you go.
Get it
Well
out.
said. Nicely said. I wasn't going to try to go there, but I wanted to add clarity to what we're talking about.
Exactly. So if we're doing this, and this is what the setup has all been about, how do you do this, and why do you want to do it? What becomes possible?
Right.
We are in a place in human evolution. We are in a place in organizational and business evolution and societal evolution where different leadership is required. Command and control, the stuff that we would typically organize around is not relevant any longer. It's not to say that it's not important, but it's not relevant in the same way that it's been before. What becomes possible if you're willing to embrace a new way of thinking that invites a new way of leading? You can begin to take the load off your shoulders a little bit. It doesn't mean that you're going to slow down, because you can't particularly slow down in this fast-paced environment.
No.
But what you can do is you can speed up calmly. When you start thinking differently, when you start organizing differently, when you actually begin to design your systems in a way that support different kinds of outcomes, the fire that's on top of your head, that your hair on fire, all of a sudden doesn't become so distracting because it starts to disappear. That's calmly. So we talked a little bit about how you show up. I mean, as a leader, when you come into the room influencing others, if your hair's on fire all the time, there's an emotional consequence to that. Yeah, people are going to respond, and they're usually it's to run to the wood piles. He or she is on the warpath today. So contraction, fear, all of these things come into play here. You want to be able to speed up effectively, and effectiveness in one way is measured by calm. There's an equanimity that kind of comes into play with this. How do you do that? That's a learned state. That's one of the things that Dolan and I are particularly adept at teaching.
Yeah.
When friction is managed, capacity is unlocked. And again, we're just, friction is always going to exist in the system. I mean, yeah,
Right.
the old organizational development joke. We went away and designed the perfect organization and screwed it up when we put people in it. People are squirrely.
Yeah.
They are. They're squirrely.
Yeah.
There's always going to be friction and rubbing. But if I'm rubbing my hands, you do this and you start to feel some heat. You
You
start to
do.
feel some warmth. Friction will generate heat. Heat will burn away stuff that's not necessary any longer, the appropriate amount of heat. Heat also will generate light. It will illuminate possibilities that you haven't noticed before. It's kind of like, oh God, we hadn't noticed that before. So when you can learn as a leader to manage friction, not eliminate it. And by friction, we're also talking here about conflict. Conflict is a natural part of an organizational dynamic. It's a function of relationship. When friction/conflict is managed, capacity is unlocked. You can begin to do things different because now you're beginning to see things differently. And what used to be necessary is no longer seen as being necessary.
Yeah. I love that. That's so incredibly important. As your job as the leader, your job is to create movement. And as part of movement, your job is to create conflict and
Yes.
to create friction. You are not seeking a frictionless environment. That is not what you are there for.
So what you are there for is this.
Yeah, what you're there for is three ways. And when Blaine and I do work, when we do our work with our clients and our work within the body of other things that we masterminds and things that we do, there are three areas we focus in. We focus in mindset, we focus in compassionate capitalism, and then we focus in on an empowerment operating system. How do you do what now that you have this? What do you do with this on a sustainable basis?
Yeah. Making it practical and translating, abstract conceptual thinking into practical, applicable action. That's that move. Leadership mindset. How do we think about stuff? Compassionate capitalism. What's the purpose of business? Uplift the experience of being alive on this planet. Empowerment operating systems. Your organization has to be designed to tap into the best of people. That's the empowerment piece. So that's the three ways of working that are woven together here so that you can actually lead at a higher level, lead in a more effective manner, be more elegant as a leader. That's what we're looking for. That's the invitation that we want to put in front of you. Leadership mindset shapes how leaders interpret complexity before they ever act. We move away from ready, fire, aim to ready. Let's take a look at this. Back up a little bit. Take that pause. What's in play, really? And then we can make a course of action.
Yeah.
Compassionate capitalism aligns performance with people so that growth doesn't extract more than it creates. We don't want to use people. We're going to use them in the pursuit of what it is that we're up to. But if people feel used, they start to feel abused. And that's, all of a sudden, you got morale issues. Yeah. So compassionate capitalism aligns performance with people so that growth doesn't extract more than it creates. And this is true not only of the employee base that works in your organization, but you start rippling out into the neighborhood, into the community, into society as a large, writ large. Business touches everything on this planet. Literally, there is nothing on this planet that is not touched by the activity of business in some way. So in that context, and this is a very, I own this completely. I'm very strongly biased in this regard. Business leaders have a responsibility to take responsibility for the whole. They have a moral obligation to take responsibility for the whole. Your decisions make a difference in the quality of people's lives.
Yep.
Period. The end. That's what we're looking at here. So how do you lead with that? The whole notion of Hippocratic oath, first do no harm.
Right.
First, do no harm.
Yeah. And an empowerment operating system. So the intention is with an empowerment operating system is how do you take how do we move mindset and how do we move the tenets of compassionate capitalism into consistent action at scale? So how do we then take these things and apply them within properly and in the right moments? Because what you see as the problem is not the problem. How do we then move these things into the organization, into the culture, into your life, and do it so that it becomes consistent, it's actionable. Although if it's not actionable, it's merely entertainment.
Spot on.
And do it at scale.
Yep. And we're not here to entertain, although we are entertaining.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Right, so.
There you go. Leadership effectiveness, we're going to begin to wrap up here. Leadership effectiveness is an additive, it's integrative, and literally it's that integration.
Yes.
Leaders, highly effective leaders, the leaders that we're looking to actually work with developing are folks that understand the integrative nature of life. Everything is connected. Everything is connected. So strength in one domain can't compensate for absence in another. So how do I actually curate a team that can actually fill in the blanks? That's what we want to be. You're not in this by yourself. I mean, this is something that you want to actually play with and begin to experiment with.
Yeah. And that, my friends, is the evolution.
That is the evolution. Yep. It moves you away from command and control.
That is the evolution. So our question is, what is leadership costing you? And it has nothing, this is not a pitch question. This is a question. What is leadership costing you? When we started the conversation, we talked about feeling heavy. We talked about having effort. We talked about impacts on your team. We talked about decisions. We've talked about this, but what is it costing you right now that it shouldn't be? Which is an indicator, by the way, as you answer that question, it's an indicator, by the way, of where your model is expired.
Yeah.
So look at it through that lens. Cost is what is expired.
Where it's expired. And how can you renew it? That's what we're looking for here.
Okay. Yeah. And I just said that.
You just said that. Yeah.
Not a pitch.
The invitation on the front end was we're going to plant a couple of seeds here. That's what Dolan and I have been doing this for a lot of years. And we are very cognizant of the fact that leaders make a difference in the world. And we're also cognizant that everybody's a leader in some way, shape, or form because leaders cause movement. People are always causing movement in any system that they find themselves a part of, whether in their family or whether they're running a large multinational organization. Leaders cause movement. Question isn't, are you a leader? You are a leader. You're causing movement. The question is, are you effective?
No debate.
And that's the question that we want to look at. Are you effective? Are you getting the kind of result that you say you want with minimal effort and producing it in a way that is generative and uplifting to the people that are involved with you? So the invitation in this little short hour was to take a look in the mirror. Okay. What are you noticing? Yeah. Notice what you're noticing. And then, from there, you can start making some choices. It's not about right or wrong, good or bad. It's about, is this working or not working? If it's not working, talk to us. We've got some ways that we can actually, facilitate something different occurring, if that's of interest to you.
Yep.
Solo business isn't about doing more. It's about leading from who you become. That's what we're after. Who you become determines what your organization becomes.
Very true. There is no mastery.
There is no mastery. Yeah. Feel free to give us a call.
Yeah, I know. It's just leaders. If you want, if look from just a closing comment, if you are interested in having a conversation around how to lead at the level that we've talked about, so that you are exploring your true capability and your capacity, let's have a conversation. That's our invitation, and it is feel invited, not obligated.
Absolutely.
This is the opportunity to have that conversation with us and reach out to us and do that. There's a link here, Doctor.
Yep, just feel free to scan that QR code and or go to that URL. And what that is a link to a conversation or a calendar. Yeah, yeah, you'll
Yeah.
actually end up setting a conversation up with either Dolan and or myself, or sometimes both of us if you're unfortunate.
Bring a lunch.
Bring a lunch. Yeah. But we'd love to have a conversation with you about how you're leading, what possibilities might be available to you. So
Yep.
want to thank you for listening. Want to thank you for kind of hanging with us for an hour. I hope you found this useful. I hope there was a couple of nuggets that you could take away, and that you found that this was a useful 60 minutes of your time. You invested in it. Let's leverage it.
There you go. All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
folks.
everybody.
Take care.